The cries came low and strange, curling through the heat-cracked silence like wind through hollow bones. It was near midnight when the first ranger stirred from his cot, stepping barefoot onto the sand, eyes searching the darkness beyond the floodlights. From the edge of the dry riverbed, something was crying. Not in anger, not in hunger, but in pain. That kind of sound didn't belong to jackals. It didn't rise like the call of hyenas or carry the defiance of a male claiming land. It was broken, heavy. It stayed low to the ground. By the time they reached the riverbed's edge, the stars were paling at the corners. They moved slowly, with radios muted and hands lowered, boots careful on loose gravel. Dust shifted beneath their steps. Too light to stir alarm, and then they saw him. He lay under a thin fringe of acacia, body stretched long across the gray stone, as if he'd walked until his legs gave out and had no wish to rise again. His mane was matted with red near the shoulder, and his side rose in shallow, uneven rhythm. He didn't lift his head when the rangers paused 20 meters out. One ear twitched once, then stilled. That was all. The night pressed around them in quiet. One ranger crouched and adjusted the lens of his field scope, careful not to point it directly at the lion's face. There was no sign of immediate threat nearby. No other lions, no scavengers waiting. Just him. One great body still breathing, holding on. A trail of disturbed earth led uphill, barely visible as though the lion had dragged himself from somewhere else. Perhaps half a kilometer, maybe more. The wound on his flank was clean but deep, not fresh. Likely a territorial fight, they thought. The older ones often lost, or sometimes they simply walked away before death could find them. Down in the gully, the air was cool with moisture the desert could not keep. Leaves trembled faintly, moths touched bark, and the moon turned its face toward dawn. The lion gave a low, aching moan, deep in his throat, a sound without shape or plea. He did not move, but his ribs shifted, labored. One ranger, still watching from behind the edge of a withered thorn bush, whispered, "He's been alone all night." No one stepped forward. Not yet. Time was slow in these decisions, even with pain in the air. They would wait until morning to move closer. A lion in distress could still lash out. Fear, even dying, could carry strength. And the first rule, always, was respect. Behind the sleeping thorn trees, the land curved into ridges where the last of the wildebeest had passed weeks ago. This male would have once ruled among them. Not seen, not needed to be. Now he lay beneath them, his weight sinking into the broken earth, his breath catching against his side. Far up the hill, a guinea fowl called out once and was answered by silence. The lion gave no answer. His eyes stayed half open but unfocused, reflecting the stars in slivers. A fly landed near his shoulder and was not brushed away. One ranger took a few slow steps down the slope, not to approach, just to place a marker for the morning. A single flag staked into the soil. A quiet reminder. They would return at first light, with supplies, observation gear, and distance. Not every lion could be helped. Not every night led to a morning. But still they would return. Above them, the stars began to fade, pulled softly behind the eastern clouds. The cries stopped. The lion had fallen silent, not from peace but from exhaustion. The wind rose slightly, rustling the acacia leaves, and the scent of dust filled the air. The men stepped back slowly, retreating without words. As the horizon began to soften and the first light washed the edges of the riverbed in gold, the lion did not move, but he was still alive. The light came slowly, pale and diluted through the morning haze. Cool wind skimmed the dry skin of the earth as the rangers stepped off the ridge and began their descent into the riverbed. The night had given no more cries, but the silence left behind was heavier than sound. Ahead of them, the trail was faint, a soft smudge of paw prints disturbed by wind and time, broken only by dark beads of blood, dull now in the early light. They followed quietly, boots pressing into the fine sand, keeping a distance they knew would not startle but still allow them to see. The lion had not moved. He lay where they left him, body half curled as if the earth had grown around him overnight. One leg was folded awkwardly beneath him, and his ribs showed the kind of deep movement that came only from pain. His eyes were open, not alert, but not gone. He watched nothing. Still, they remained open. A gust stirred the dust around his body, lifting small pieces of twig and husk. The wound on his side was clear now, just behind the shoulder, gaping and raw, not bleeding freely, but seeping, the kind of wound that spoke of teeth. A deep territorial fight, the rangers suspected, perhaps with a younger male, or two. The older lions often bore such scars in their final seasons. This one had not been chased far, but far enough. The air carried a faint scent of blood mixed with the sweetness of acacia bloom. One ranger knelt behind a cluster of low shrubs, raising binoculars without sound. The lion's mane was scattered with dust and burrs. His mouth opened once, drawing in a shallow breath, then closed without effort to rise. There was no growl, no sign of resistance. Just the steady resignation of a body too tired to flee, too proud to call again. The others stood back, forming a loose semicircle that never crossed the boundary of the lion's awareness. They wouldn't touch him, not yet. Tranquilizers came only when there was no other path. And, in the wild, time often decided such things before humans could intervene. Birds moved in the upper branches, small and unnoticed. A dove cooed from somewhere above, its sound falling like water into the silence. The lion blinked once. His tail moved faintly in the dust, not in agitation but as a reflex, as if remembering what it meant to swat flies. One of the younger rangers whispered, "He's still breathing." Barely. The older one beside him nodded slowly, eyes narrowed against the light. They'd seen this before. The ones who lay down like this didn't always rise again. Still, the lion had made it through the night. That meant something. Survival wasn't always loud or brave. Sometimes it was just stillness. A plan began to take shape among them, quiet and careful. If the lion did not worsen, they could place treated meat within reach. Not too close. Let him choose. They would return again by midday. No sudden movements, no lights, just patience. Pain couldn't be taken from a wild animal, but dignity could be preserved. Around the lion, the dust had formed a shallow imprint, the kind of hollow that wild things leave behind when they stay too long in one place. The flies were returning now, small black threads gathering near the edges of the wound. Still, the lion didn't flick his ear. His eyes followed the shadows slowly, as if measuring how far the sun had moved. No one stepped closer. Instead, they placed a water pan near the base of a rock, half shaded and out of the way. They marked the spot and left the food for later. It was not about saving. It was about giving a choice, one more time. The wind shifted again, curling up from the valley floor, carrying with it the scent of dew evaporating from stone. Insects buzzed and stilled, and somewhere in the far distance, an oryx called, sharp and brief. The lion closed his eyes for the first time. Not in sleep, not in surrender, just a brief refusal of the morning. The rangers turned to leave, their backs slow to rise from crouching. No one spoke. Dust clung to their pants and boots. Behind them, the scar in the dust deepened slightly as the lion's body adjusted a fraction toward the sun. Not toward them. But he was still there. And for now, that was enough. The midday heat arrived in silence, folding over the valley in heavy, shimmering layers. The lion had not moved far, only shifted slightly so that his body no longer pressed against the rising slope of rock. His head now rested flat along the ground, turned toward the opening where the dry riverbed widened. His breathing had steadied but remained thin, shallow, measured in the rise of dust at his ribs. The wound had not worsened, but the flies had gathered again. One ranger crouched behind a fallen log, quietly adjusting a pair of tongs. holding a strip of meat coated in powdered antibiotic. There would be no tranquilizer today, only offering. They worked without speaking. Each action had already been agreed upon in soft words before they left the truck. The meat was placed 5 meters from where the lion lay, near the base of a dry root twisted into the sand. Water was poured slowly into a shallow steel pan and placed at a respectful distance, where the sun would not scald it too quickly. Then the team withdrew, not out of fear, but so the choice would remain the lions alone. For over an hour nothing happened. The insects returned, weaving between the low shrubs. Distant calls of guinea fowl rose and fell, unnoticed. The lion's eyes stayed closed. A single bee hovered above the pan before drifting away. But then, as the shadow of a branch shifted across his flank, the lion stirred. First, his back paw curled slightly inward, brushing the dust. Then the tail moved. One slow sweep, as though remembering wind. His head lifted just a little and his eyes opened with effort, slow and deliberate. There was no rush. He blinked once and let the world settle into focus. The scent of blood, of humans, of meat. His nostrils flared faintly. His ears twitched, not toward danger but toward presence. He didn't rise, but he inched forward, the movement painful, uneven, almost dragging. It took him 5 minutes to reach the meat. He paused beside it, breathing heavily, and then lowered his head. The sound of chewing was quiet but unmistakable. Dry leaves shifted under his weight. A small stone cracked beneath his front paw. He did not eat quickly. Each bite was thoughtful, restrained, as if conserving what little strength remained. The rangers watched from a distance, barely visible behind scrub and stone, eyes tracking every gesture with reverence. He finished only half before stopping. Then he licked his nose, lifted his head, and turned toward the pan. He didn't move toward it yet, just looked. But the tail moved again, a single thump into the dust. A breath caught in someone's throat. No words were needed, but one of them murmured, barely audible. "Good boy." It wasn't meant to comfort. It was a note of witness. The lion did not startle at the sound. His ears stayed open, relaxed. He blinked again, slow, full, and unafraid. The kind of blink that in lions means distance has been measured and is no longer a threat. The kind that, in rare moments, means something deeper has passed. It was not trust, not fully, but it was something like it. As the sun bent westward, light fell across the riverbed in amber angles. The lion rested again, head on paws, eyes still watching the place where the humans had been. He did not sleep, but he did not turn away. And when the wind moved across the sand, he did not rise or flinch. He simply remained. The rangers pulled back slowly, their steps careful not to disturb the crust of earth. Their work for the day was finished. They would return again at dusk. The lion had eaten. That was enough, for now. In the last hour of light, a thin veil of golden dust lifted across the land. The lion's body, though wounded and lean, looked larger in the glow. Not strong yet, but not gone. Around him, the shadows stretched long and unbroken, and through it all, his eyes stayed open. The air was cooler before dawn, the kind that held its breath. Across the flat of the riverbed, the shadows had not yet lifted, but the sky had begun to pale in soft grays. The lion lay curled tighter than before, his mane rippling gently in the breeze, ribs moving slow and steady. He had eaten twice now, small portions, and drunk enough to dull the dryness in his throat. The wound remained, red-edged and open, but not angry. It no longer bled. A fragile stillness had replaced the earlier ache. One ranger stood at the edge of the ridge, arms crossed, watching. He had not slept, but his eyes remained calm. The others had stayed back this morning, giving space for quiet. Some instincts, they understood, moved best in solitude. The lion had not shifted for hours. His gaze wandered in slow arcs, but his body did not rise. Then, without warning, he lifted his head. The movement was deliberate. His ears tilted slightly, scanning a sound not yet heard by the humans above. His mouth parted, breath low and scratchy, and then came the sound, a call, deep and drawn from some long place within. It was not loud. It did not carry the force of territory or challenge. It was older than that, thinner, uncertain, the cry of a lion alone, but no longer silent. The ranger held still, the sound pressing against the early light like smoke over water. Silence followed. Then, from far off beyond the ridge, a second sound stirred. At first, it might have been mistaken for wind brushing across rock, but it came again, closer this time. A reply. The ranger's eyes shifted, scanning the crest of the opposite slope. The lion's ears turned forward. From behind the tall grass and low brush, a shape began to move. A lioness, younger, her frame lean from travel, emerged with cautious steps. She did not call again. She simply moved, weaving gently through the last of the dry acacia. Her paws made no sound on the earth. Her eyes were fixed on the trail of scent, faint and scattered, that led her downward. She paused more than once, turning her head sharply, reading the wind. Her tail flicked in tight, nervous movements. There was no rush in her body, no clear intention, just curiosity, and hunger, maybe. Her bones showed faintly through her flanks. She looked like one who had wandered alone for some time. The lion lifted his head higher but did not stand. He made no sound now, only watched, his eyes following her carefully. When she reached the base of the ridge, she stopped and lowered her body into the tall grass, pressing herself into the earth without fully lying down. Her ears stayed forward. Her breathing was steady. The distance between them remained. The ranger shifted slightly behind a rock, careful not to step. These were moments that could not be forced. No reunion, no understanding, just presence. The lion remained still. His tail moved once, brushing the dust. The lioness blinked slowly. Then she turned her head to one side and exhaled sharply through her nose, a sound of acknowledgement, not invitation. They did not move toward each other. There was no touch, no sound of joy. But the space between them changed, softened somehow. The lion rested his chin back on the earth, and the lioness remained where she was, eyes on the brush, not leaving. She did not sleep. She simply stayed. Behind the hills, the sky warmed in thin bands of color. Pale apricot stretched low over the horizon, and the shadows on the ground began to shrink. The wind shifted slightly, stirring the grass between them. The lion made no further sound, but his body relaxed in a way that hadn't been seen before, the kind of settling that came not from strength, but from no longer needing to listen for something missing. And though the lioness had not stepped closer, she had not turned away either. When the sun finally touched the edge of the valley floor, it found them both there, still, distant, and not alone. The ground held the soft warmth of early light, not yet hot, but no longer cold. Dew had gathered briefly in the hollows between stones, vanishing in quiet steam as the sun climbed. The lion's breath came slow, though steadier than it had days before. His body, though lean and scabbed with dust, no longer sank into the earth. The wound had sealed in its outer edges, crusted thick where the flies now ignored. One paw shifted beneath him, a slight movement, then another. It was not graceful, it was not swift, but it was change. The lioness had moved in the night, not far. Her tracks curved up toward a patch of shade where the ridge broke open, leaving only brush and light scrub. She had left no scent of fear. Her prints stayed straight and unbroken, as if she expected him to follow, or at least understood that he might try. She had not come close. She had not needed to. Her presence had done something no salve or needle could have reached. From a distance, the rangers watched. One leaned on his knee, slow in breath, squinting not from sun but from quiet hope. Another adjusted the scope, not for detail, but to hold the moment longer. The lion moved again, this time rising on one elbow. His shoulder dipped as he pushed, hind legs dragging in short, shaking lines. The climb took nearly 5 minutes. His ribs strained beneath his coat. His mouth hung open for breath. But he stood. For the first few steps his left side faltered, dropping low, then catching itself. His tail lifted faintly, curved in balance, twitching near the base. The dust rose in small clouds with each step, barely disturbed. He didn't look back. He didn't pause to scent the air. His body knew which way she had gone. Some instinct, older than pain, had taken root again. He walked slowly, uneven, limping, but with direction. His gait bore the mark of both injury and age, yet the muscles beneath his flank flexed with purpose. At one point he paused near the water pan the rangers had left behind. He did not drink. He simply looked down, then lifted his head and continued forward, legs carrying more weight than before. The lioness, half hidden in the brush ahead, remained still. Her ears turned slightly, adjusting to the crunch of footsteps behind her. She did not rise, she did not turn, but she stayed. The lion drew closer, reducing the distance that had once felt impossible. 10 meters, then 5. He did not call. He did not need to. When he reached the edge of her scent, he lowered his body again, this time slowly, with control. He lay not in defeat, but in rest. His eyes did not close. They stayed fixed on the line of scrub just ahead, where her shape rested, soft and waiting. No words passed between the rangers. There were none that would fit. One reached down and quietly switched off the radio clipped to his vest. Another whispered, barely audible, "He made it." It was not celebration. It was witness. The wind shifted gently, lifting the grasses along the slope and turning them silver. Above the ridge the sun broke cleanly, laying a golden path down through the broken trees. Light touched the lion's back first, then spilled across the space between him and the lioness. The air held no sound but wind and small insects, alive in their morning rhythm, and in that hush, 2 lions lay beneath the new day, together, not touching, not joined, but no longer alone. The last of the shadows pulled away. The rangers stepped back, and the grass kept moving. The grass kept moving. Small gusts swept through the basin in slow, curling strokes, tugging at old bark, shaking dust from brittle leaves. The wind carried no urgency, only rhythm, the kind that returns after days of silence. A lone drongo called once from a thorny perch, its voice thin and sharp against the softened air, then fell quiet again. In the space between the 2 lions, nothing changed outwardly, but the stillness was no longer strained. The kind that lingers not from fear, but from quiet recognition. The lion's body, worn and newly upright, had settled into the dust with more weight than before. His front paws, stretched ahead, pressed deep enough to mark the earth beneath him. One of his ears twitched as the wind shifted again, brushing against the raw patch along his shoulder. He did not wince. He did not rise. But he was not at rest. His eyes remained open, steady, tracking the lioness in the grass beyond. She had not moved. Her head remained lowered but not flat. One foreleg rested beneath her chest, coiled in readiness or habit. She had known hunger recently. Her ribs were clear in the morning light, and her eyes, when she blinked, held the cautious sharpness of a creature who had needed no one for too long. Yet still, she had stayed through the night. Not close enough to touch, but close enough to hear his call. The rangers remained beyond sight now. They had retreated farther into the trees, knowing this moment belonged only to the animals. No medicine could do what time and quiet presence might offer. No intervention could offer what that stillness was beginning to repair. Later that morning, when the sun had fully risen and the flies began their return, The lion stirred again. It was not dramatic. His shoulder shifted first, then the arc of his back. His neck moved stiffly, drawing his head to the side, where the lioness now stood. She had risen without sound and begun to move. Not away, but slowly, in a wide half-circle across the base of the ridge. Her path was thoughtful. Curved rather than direct, not to show fear, but to keep space between them. She stopped often to scent the ground, flicking her tail as though chasing insects. She moved like a lioness familiar with being watched. And yet, when she paused beneath a low branch and turned her head over her shoulder, it was toward him. The lion took one step forward. The motion was strained but stable. Dust rose beneath his paw, then another step, shorter, more careful. His gait was uneven. The wound on his flank, though scabbed, tightened visibly when he turned slightly. But he continued, following the wide arc she had left behind. He didn't close the gap. He mirrored her path. When she stopped, he stopped. When she lay again near the edge of the shade, he settled into the soil once more, this time facing her. Between them now was only a few meters of grass, humming with heat and insects. A gap wide enough to flee if needed, but narrow enough to feel known. The lioness exhaled sharply, a short burst of air through her nose. The lion's ears flicked forward in response. That afternoon, the rangers placed another small pan of water near the base of the slope and left without lingering. The lion did not drink, but the lioness approached after the sun passed its peak, lowering her head only once to lap quietly, then retreating to her shaded place. The lion watched her without lifting his head. Hours passed like that. Long stretches of stillness interrupted only by subtle shifts in position. Flies moved, dust settled, the sky deepened toward late light. The lions did not touch, but they no longer moved apart. In the evening, the lion ate again. The meat was not placed as close as before, and it took more effort to reach it. He walked with clear pain but refused to rest until he had finished every strip. When he returned to the base of the ridge, the lioness was gone from the spot she had claimed most of the day. The rangers watched carefully for signs of departure, but there were none. Moments later, she reappeared just beyond the low thorn bushes, her face and flanks dappled by fading light. She circled behind him in a wide loop, then settled farther downhill, angled so her eyes could still hold his. That night, there were no cries. Only the sounds of wind in the tall grass, the brushing of dry leaves against bark, the quiet rustle of small things making peace with the dark. The lion slept, his body finally folding into the dust without resistance. He didn't curl tightly. One leg remained stretched long beside him. When the moon rose, pale and cold above the horizon, its light caught the lioness's coat as she moved once more. She closed the distance between them by a few careful paces, stopped, then lay down. This time she faced outward, toward whatever might still come. By morning, the light was gentler than it had been in days. The lion rose without coaxing. His limp remained, but he did not hesitate. The lioness walked ahead of him this time, not fast, not waiting, but moving. He followed. No sound passed between them. Just the steady rhythm of paws against earth, slow and broken, but forward. Behind them, the dry riverbed fell quiet again. And farther off, where the low trees gave way to open plain, the grass moved softly, not in warning, but in welcome.